I hate my mobile phone. The signal peak zone is the size of a small basketball court, and I rarely get 4 bars. I'm lucky to get 2, even in the city center. Here, in the middle of nowhere, I'm lucky to get 1, depending on the phase of the moon, how I hold the phone, and which names of gods I utter while slowly moving the phone around the room until I catch a stray signal from the nearest tower. My boss, Joel Woodlake, the principal owner of our business and managing partner, has a BlackBerry that could probably get a good signal on the far side of the moon. That bastard can run his entire life with that little gadget, and he does. He watches sports, trades stocks, handles all his banking, and even plays online ponies with brokers. Yes, sometimes he even does a little work when he isn't playing golf on it. It's good to be the boss, I guess. He owns 66% of the company, with the rest controlled by old neighborhood friends from Philadelphia who invested in the venture. I've never met them, but I've heard a few scary stories through a friend of a friend, suggesting they have mafia connections. Not the kind of acquaintances you want if a business deal goes south. Apparently, oops, sorry, isn't going to cut it. They don't know me from Adam, and I'd like to keep it that way. Me? I'm just a hired hand, living paycheck to paycheck, waiting for those rare moments when I can stand up and beg for sales bonuses or the tiny annual profit-sharing check. As the chief technician and lead equipment specialist in the company, I'm supposed to get a small bonus from every initial sales commission every time I help one of the salespeople, if they close the deal, but funny enough, those checks are very rare. Our company installs high-end computer alarm systems and home automation. It's a pretty good product, which usually shows well to informed clients, especially working young professional couples. With micro cameras in every room, a young mother can return to her job and still monitor everything the nanny or housekeeper does on her computer screen at work. The only downside is that we don't have exclusive rights to this product and we don't manufacture it. Someday, a smart and well-funded competitor will come along, buy these devices in bulk, and undercut us on price. That's not my problem, though. I hope by the time that day comes, I'll be working somewhere else, or even for that new competitor. Yes, my job sucks and I should quit, but the economy is a bit sluggish right now, and no one is going to be knocking on my door this week, waiting to kiss the ring on my pinky. I'm slowly looking for something better, but for now, I'm content to wait. Better to have a little money than none at all. Terry, my wife, also works, and in my opinion, we're doing quite well, but she doesn't think so. We both earn about the same, but she spends money much faster than I do. She's a very attractive woman and always likes to show off her assets. She loves to dress up, even for work, and enjoys turning heads and attracting admirers wherever she goes. She also flirts a bit and can easily get the attention of anyone she wants. Our marriage isn't perfect, but I was sure I couldn't find anyone better than her, at least in terms of looks, if we ever split up. This helped keep my mind and hands from wandering when we fought or went through tough times. Terry works as a senior accountant at a fairly large accounting firm. It's a decent job at a well-known local company with a reputation for treating its employees much better than their competitors. Her salary isn't the highest, but they offer a good benefits package, paid training, annual bonuses, lots of parties and other events, and an extremely flexible work schedule. They have a lot of flex hours, so her work schedule is irregular, and she gets a lot of compensatory time off instead of overtime pay. She also has to travel a few times a month, usually overnight, but she enjoys it. She's also often allowed to work from home, and she usually works remotely at least 1 day a week. It would be the perfect setup for us if we had kids, but that hadn't happened until about 4 months ago when she announced that she was finally pregnant for the first time. I was astounded because I assumed she was still taking her pills, and we hadn't discussed starting a family recently. Still, being in our early 30s is a good time to start a family, and if you keep waiting for the perfect moment, you might wait forever. She seemed happy, and I decided I would be happy too. Overall, I thought we had a pretty decent marriage. Sure, we fought often, but I didn't see it as a serious problem, and compared to most of our friends, our relationship seemed one of the best. However, Terry was a hard woman to satisfy, let alone make happy. We were barely living within our means. Terry didn't like living frugally, but she loved keeping up with the Joneses. This meant we were paying for a nice new car for her, an expensive wardrobe with frequent updates, regular spa and salon treatments, a house bigger than we needed that consumed almost my entire salary just to manage the payments. But I usually thought it was all worth it. My illusions that we were doing well as a couple shattered when I borrowed Joel's BlackBerry to make a routine call during one of our joint sales trips. He had an important business meeting with a major residential property developer on the golf course, and he didn't want to be interrupted for any reason so he could close the deal. He left his mobile phone with me. The potential client was old-fashioned and would likely demand Joel's undivided attention for the next 3 hours, which would leave me hanging in the wind out of boredom. Still, it was better than a day spent in the office. The deal involved supplying and installing over 100 security and home automation devices for the developer's current project, which would definitely boost our sales figures this quarter. I might even get a small bonus for this deal. I spent the next few hours at the 19th hole, the country club bar, sipping iced tea while waiting for them to finish their round of golf and business discussions. I didn't really understand why I was needed at this meeting, but apparently, Joel just wanted me nearby to handle any urgent technical questions the developer might have. I was already thinking about calling the office to get some hypothetical delivery data for Joel when suddenly my own cell phone rang. It indicated that it had finally picked up a signal and I could use it. And so I did. There would be no problem promising delivery of the devices in about 2 weeks, and at least 3 full crews would be ready for installation. The bastard would be pleased, and in my opinion, he now owed me a small favor. I decided to grant it to myself by sneaking a peek at his BlackBerry to see what hot stock tips he had been getting lately. It seemed his stockbrokers were constantly sending him the latest market tips, and he was always bragging about how great his brokers were. Instead of browsing through his old emails, I somehow pressed the wrong button and ended up in the wrong menu. I always hated the tiny buttons on a BlackBerry, which is why I don't have one. I have thick fingers. I admit it. Trying to fix my mistake, I pressed redial, and things suddenly got very interesting. The last number Joel had called earlier that morning was my wife's cell phone. How on earth did Joel have my wife's phone number? And why? I quickly ended the call before she could answer. Now I was a man on a mission. After fiddling around a bit more, I finally accessed his email archive and found several folders with saved text messages and emails from his brokers. He had 3 other business friends and partners, silent partners, and last but not least, a folder with messages from his more intimate partners, among whom was my wife. The text messages alone made it clear they had been having an affair for some time, possibly nearly a year. Explicit photos taken with a phone camera removed any remaining doubts. Damn, my wife had never sent me any naked pictures, especially not ones as explicit as these. I was shocked and stunned. I had no idea this was happening right under my nose. They had been very careful, discreet, and smart. If it weren't for my accidental access to Joel's BlackBerry, I would have never known what they were up to. They were extremely cautious and clever, but now I would have a chance to prove that I could be smarter, or at least a bit nastier. I had about 2 hours of peace, and I needed almost every minute of it. Working with mobile phones, especially BlackBerries, was on the edge of my technological comfort zone. To do what I wanted, I would need specialist skills. I didn't know such a specialist, but I knew someone who certainly could help. Oscar Grump, not the green talking puppet from Sesame Street, but the one who ran a spy gadget shop in a suburban mall not too far from the golf course. This Oscar was much grumpier and harder to deal with. We bought a lot of special additional materials and supplies from him, and he knew and tolerated me well enough. I also had an ace up my sleeve. Oscar, oh great and wise one. I began my preamble. You are insightful and all-knowing. May your wisdom bring joy to the heart of this miserable cuckold. Teach me, magnificent one, the secrets of cloning a crackberry, so I may exact revenge on my unworthy foes. Oscar didn't like cheating wives. A few years ago, his ex had unexpectedly cleaned him out. He warmed up to me almost immediately, and within minutes we were in his private office, with Joel's BlackBerry being disassembled by the hands of a master. An hour later, I had a perfect clone in my hands, receiving everything Joel sent or received, along with all his passwords. The costs were quite moderate, mainly just the price of a new BlackBerry and a few other necessary parts. Oscar loved making money, but he hated cheating wives even more. Revenge was his favorite currency, and I assured him he wouldn't be disappointed. Putting my new silent mode toy at the bottom of my bag, I managed to return to the golf club and have another refreshing iced tea before Joel and our new client finished their game. I was surprised at how polite I could be to my boss after learning he was regularly sleeping with my wife. I just smiled a lot, imagining him being sodomized with a red-hot poker, and muttered to myself, "I'll get you, bastard." When I was assured the contract was ready to sign and the deal was done, my presence was no longer needed, so I returned to work and spent the rest of the day brooding in my office. My revenge would take time. I wanted everything to be done right. My boss had never treated me fairly and had effectively cheated me out of possibly thousands of dollars in earned bonuses that I never received. And now, stealing my wife was the last straw. The first step was to thoroughly download everything from my newly cloned BlackBerry to a real computer so I could see what I was doing and avoid accidentally deleting or changing anything on my perfectly copied phone. Besides, any mistakes I made could affect Joel's original phone, possibly alerting him that his device was no longer secure. This took some time. God, he had a lot of unnecessary files, and he apparently never deleted anything. When I finished, I could now comfortably read everything Joel had stored on his phone on my computer, with information spanning nearly 3 years. Now I could use this information against him to plan the most terrifying and complete revenge. In the next few days, I didn't manage to get much actual work done, but otherwise, the office was fairly quiet, giving me time to go through and study all of Joel's files, emails, and messages. Gradually, a comprehensive plan started forming in my mind, but it would take time to implement. At least now, I fully understood the entire situation. Joel was definitely a thief, and not just because he stole my wife. He was skimming money from the company left and right from every place he could, including the well-known issue of stealing money from employee commissions and bonuses. We were also overpaying for most supplies and outsourced services, for which Joel was obviously receiving hefty kickbacks. He was also underreporting the value of each sales contract to nearly break-even levels in our reports, but secretly billing most of our major clients at much higher rates. It seemed money was leaking under the table from all sides. I was confident his silent partners knew nothing about this clandestine double-dealing and would undoubtedly be more than interested. The loot, and there was a lot of it, was mostly in the capable hands of Joel's stockbrokers. There were 3 of them, each with roughly equal shares of the initial money they carefully gathered for subsequent investment. One of Joel's brokers was undoubtedly a genius, playing the recent stock market's ups and downs like a violinist at a concert. He had multiplied his working share into a small fortune, far exceeding Joel's initial investments. I made a note to pay particular attention to this broker's financial advice. The other 2 brokers were competent and also grew their shares, but not nearly as much as the first. Each of them evidently believed they were Joel's sole financial advisor and knew nothing about the other competing accounts. This knowledge would be very useful. My wife Terry was deeply involved in these accounting shenanigans, both in preparing numerous sets of creatively maintained books and as Joel's main mistress. Her business trips were nothing more than monthly erotic rendezvous with Joel in some fancy hotel or resort, away from the prying eyes of local folks. Oh, they still managed to have weekly love meetings, usually in an expensive local hotel, but sometimes in a motel if they felt particularly naughty or adventurous. She enjoyed the thrill of secret infidelity and had her eyes on the big jackpot she helped Joel grow. Evidently, her ultimate goal was to leave me and become Mrs. Joel Woodlake. I'm not sure she would find it amusing to learn that there were at least 3 other young ladies who also wanted the same position. Joel, it seemed, had a very active and busy sex life, involving several other married women he met with in turn. Oh, he seemed to have a particular fondness for Terry and definitely enjoyed having sex with her, but he had no plans to marry anyone. If he had to run for it, he would most likely try to escape alone. On the other hand, Terry had no intention of letting Joel get away, especially since he was definitely the seed donor who became the father of Terry's growing child. She admitted as much to him in one of their lovey-dovey text messages to each other. Any thoughts of possibly taking softer revenge and trying to mend our relationship were forever discarded. From now on, it would be scorched earth. Other information on the BlackBerry was somewhat interesting but not as crucial at the moment. I had full access to all his banking and brokerage accounts, but it was too early to play with them. He had an active account with a local gambling organization and often bet on ponies, increasing the number of bets using text messages. He didn't win often, but he didn't lose often either. Currently, this account had a small positive balance, and he was approved for a credit line of up to $50,000. He had a similar credit account at a casino in Reno, where the balance was slightly higher and a pre-approved line of credit up to at least $200,000. Joel had been there several times and played high stakes, losing a large sum on his first visit but quickly paying off his debt. He last visited the casino 2 months ago, apparently with Terry, and came out slightly ahead but left his winnings in the casino account. The casino would be very happy to see Joel again soon. Carefully gathering all this information, I began to formulate my plan. I wasn't in a hurry to execute it. There seemed to be no need to rush or act hastily. I decided to first piece together all the parts of the puzzle and wait for the right moment. Sharing a house with an unfaithful crap who only pretended to be my loving wife turned out to be easier than I thought. Our paths hardly crossed over the next few weeks as she pretended to be busy and tired from a hectic work schedule. In my eyes, she was nothing but a debauched cheater, and the few times we had sex, I found unexpected pleasure and satisfaction in treating her exactly that way. She responded to my aggressive lovemaking with a newfound interest. Evidently, she had gotten used to rough treatment from her other lover, Joel, and had started to enjoy it. Now, even acts of sex that were previously off-limits to me, like oral and anal, became a regular part of our revitalized sex life. Interestingly, our intimate life saw peculiar improvement. I found an unexpected release in our encounters, treating my wife in a degrading manner that mirrored my deepest frustrations. I vented my anger through acts that reduced her to the lowest form of servitude. I called her vile names, inflicted bites, slaps, and pinches upon her breasts, and on one occasion, turned her backside a vivid cherry red before subjecting her to rough sodomy when she attempted to decline one evening. She relished every moment. In hindsight, I sometimes believe that had we communicated better, had she shared her submissive desires with me, we might have discovered a mutual understanding, perhaps preventing her infidelity. I began to experience emotional turmoil, torn between a revived attachment to my wife and a growing need to punish and destroy Joel. I even started to wonder if Terry was reconsidering her affair with Joel, and I thought that with a little push, she might even confess. But regardless, she still met him as scheduled the next week, and the weeks after. New photos and short videos on Joel's BlackBerry showed that they had quite a good time, mostly in bed, during her next business trip at the end of that month. I guess the allure of money was still too strong for her. Over the next month, I kept a close eye on the cloned BlackBerry to know exactly what was happening with both participants in the affair, ready to act at any moment if the situation started to change. It happened sooner than I expected, but I was more than ready. Late one evening, I was visiting Terry's office to make copies of some of Joel's falsified financial documents when I saw a notice on the company's bulletin board in the copy room. Some time ago, I had made a copy of Terry's office key and knew when the coast would likely be clear, ensuring no one would see or remember my visits. After skimming through the notice, the final steps of my revenge plan suddenly came to mind. It was a terrifying and audacious plan, and if anything went wrong, I would be trapped with no hope of escape. But it felt so right. The notice was about a memorial service for one of the firm's senior accountants, who had died the day before in a hit-and-run accident. I recognized her name, Betty Mitchell. She was the accounting manager overseeing Joel's accounts and personally prepared the annual profit and loss statements and other reports sent to his partners. Her accounting was honest. As they say, garbage in, garbage out. It wasn't her fault that Joel and Terry provided her with extremely inaccurate falsified documents on which she had to base her work. According to all the news reports, her death was deemed a tragic and unfortunate accident. The car that hit her had been stolen less than an hour earlier by some teenagers who abandoned the wrecked vehicle at the scene in a panic. Nothing sinister, just bad luck. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But with the right materials in the right hands, one could devise a far less innocent explanation. and I had just the materials at hand. I finished photocopying a large collection of Betty's original financial documents, especially the invoices and expenses that I knew were fraudulent. Then, I paid a late-night visit to our office and, without much effort, found the appropriate, original, untainted documents in Joel's secret files hidden in the back room. I made several sets of photocopies. I stuffed these before and after sets of documents into a large manila envelope marked with the accounting firm's return address and carefully addressed the package to the senior member of Joel's silent partnership. On the back of the envelope, I couldn't resist writing in neat, anonymous block letters, "To be mailed and opened in the event of my death, Betty." This, of course, would open a very unpleasant can of worms, but it was just the first phase of my master plan. The second phase was much simpler. Using my clone, I sent a message to Joel's best broker, instructing him to cash out, liquidate everything, and go all in on the highly recommended Can't Miss stocks he had mentioned to Joel earlier that day. I sent a message to Joel's second broker, instructing him to also immediately liquidate his assets, but then transfer all the funds to a new offshore bank account I had just opened. To the third, least successful broker, I gave the order to cash out as well and short sell the same stocks that the first broker was betting on to skyrocket. The third phase was next and went just as smoothly. I contacted Joel's bookie and placed a large number of wildly random bets on the upcoming week's horse races, mostly on long shots with no chance of paying out. In case one of the bets actually turned out to be a winner, I instructed the bookie to hold all winnings and place them on a specific horse running in the big national race the following Sunday. The fourth phase was also quite simple. I sent an email to Joel's casino VIP services, stating that I would be arriving the next weekend and requesting to book a suite and fully utilize my approved credit limit at the casino. They replied almost instantly, confirming my reservation. The fifth phase dealt with the more mundane aspects of my Scorched Earth campaign. I wasn't too concerned about what to do with the house or our other marital property. The house was fully mortgaged in both our names, and with the housing market downturn, we had practically no equity. Our joint accounts were equally meager and didn't require any adjustments. Moreover, I was particularly careful to ensure that all our recent banking transactions appeared normal. There would undoubtedly be an investigation, and I didn't want even the slightest suspicion that I was planning an escape. The offshore bank account was opened under a false name, also kindly provided by Oscar Grump, using a public computer at the library with numerous proxy servers to completely obscure my internet trail. The sixth phase was just as routine but very necessary. I prepared email packets containing saved explicit and pornographic photos to send to the 3 other husbands whose wives Joel had been cuckolding. I didn't want to send them just yet, but the messages were ready to go at a moment's notice. Now, all that remained was to clean up. I completely and thoroughly wiped my work computer, which I had used to download materials from the cloned BlackBerry. Then I struck the original hard drive 40 or 50 times against the cement floor before finally sending it to the bottom of the local lake. I left Terry's laptop completely untouched. I was confident that incriminating emails and other documents would be found on it, but I had more than enough information from other sources. Not a single fingerprint of mine touched that device. I hoped this would help keep my ass safe. For the next 2 days, I monitored Joel's incoming messages with extra care and vigilance, intercepting and deleting only 2 messages that might have caused him alarm or concern. On Friday, right after lunch, I transmitted the virus I received from Oscar to Joel's actual BlackBerry and eagerly listened as Joel discovered his phone was dead. I kindly offered to take it to the repair shop and assured him that everything could be restored in about a week or so. Heh. The final act in this drama was to organize my own business trip, set to start the following Monday. It wasn't difficult to come up with a good legitimate reason to leave town, and I had already made phone calls to arrange it. One of our largest old clients was in Carson City, Nevada, and they had encountered some minor issues with the software in their security computer complex. They wanted me to come out for a day or 2 to resolve the problem. It would be easy to fix, but I could also exaggerate the severity of the issue if I needed a few more days away from home to clear my head. Terry was delighted to hear that I was going on a little road trip. "You don't often get out of town and have fun," she remarked. She also didn't object at all when I said I would leave on Saturday after lunch, since finding a Sunday flight to Carson City was practically impossible at such short notice. This likely fit perfectly with her plans. I was sure she would take the opportunity to have a fling with Joel while I was away. She probably had some regrets, but her torrid affair with Joel didn't seem to have cooled much. And again, I was certain she was blinded by the money, millions of dollars soon to be at her wanton fingertips. On Saturday morning, we had an excellent farewell sex. It was old-fashioned, tender lovemaking, just like we used to share in the happy early years of our marriage. For a moment, it seemed she had a pang of conscience and might even be ready to confess. Something inside her seemed to click, as if she realized what she had lost because of her affair with Joel. Maybe if I had stayed a few more minutes, she would have confessed. Perhaps we could have worked things out, or maybe not. We'll never know. She kissed me goodbye lovingly at the airport drop-off, and I never saw her again. The trip to Carson City went smoothly, and I rented a car for the short drive to Reno. Oscar Grump had supplied me with a new top-notch, but expensive, fake ID in the name of Joel Woodlake, and within minutes of arriving, the casino was eating out of my hand, eager to let me dig myself into as deep a hole as I could afford. I was astonished at how few obstacles I encountered to get my credit advance. I expected a mountain of paperwork, fingerprints, or even retina scans, but all I had to do was smile, show the ID, provide the reservation and casino account number, and sign my name with an illegible scrawl on the receipt they placed in front of me. I was wearing one of Joel's old college jackets from USC, a wig matching his hair color under a baseball cap, and Joel's aviator sunglasses. I did my best to keep my face out of the surveillance cameras while collecting my first $50,000 in chips, but it was clear that they either didn't care much about security or didn't want to risk offending one of their VIP clients. I gulped down my first wad of chips like a drunken sailor on leave before the buffet was even served in the restaurant and woke up a broken but happy man with a couple $1,000 a night high-class girls under my arm as I went to bed. They were worth every cent of Joel's money. I would remember that night for a long time. Naturally, they cleaned out my room of every penny I had left from the night before as they tiptoed out early in the morning, but that was to be expected. My personal money, ID, and other belongings were wisely locked in the rental car, and I hid the car key under the couch cushion. On Sunday morning, I signed for another stack of $50,000 in chips and started playing much more conservatively, trying to stay close to even. I acted like I was spending money recklessly, but I was playing smart to avoid losing too much. After lunch, I gathered another group of high-class escorts and had some fun, giving them $500 in chips each for putting on a good show to warm us all up for the second round of fun. Then I signed out another $50,000, but I handled it wisely. They saw me as a high roller, but I discreetly stashed away at least half of those chips. In the evening, I collected the final $50,000 in gaming money and stashed all those chips to cash out later using my real identity. I resisted the urge to cash in my total winnings of just over $132,000 in chips under my name and settled for collecting $7,000 in small bills. This amount was enough to avoid reporting to the IRS, and I left Reno with my head still attached to my body. I had plenty of casino money left in chips waiting to be cashed out, but I could return in a few weeks to deal with that. I wanted enough time to pass so that some overly clever manager or cashier wouldn't recall that I had posed as Joel weeks or months earlier. To be safer, I would also need to cash out in small amounts, preferably no more than $10,000 at a time. Inconvenient, but definitely the safest way to get the money. The stolen $125,000 was much more than I expected to get, and now Joel was on the hook for the full $200,000. I was sure they would want the money back immediately, especially since Joel had never officially checked out of his room and appeared to have just vanished. Late Sunday evening, back in my hotel room in Carson City, I checked the clone phone to see what was happening. Everything had started to unfold. Joel's partners had received my little package in the mail on Saturday and were already extremely upset. By now, they had left Joel more than 10 voicemails, which, since his real phone wasn't working, he hadn't received. The last 2 messages contained an unmistakable hint that their friends would soon be paying him a visit for some answers. It was time to finish the cleanup. Knowing all of Joel's regular checking and savings accounts and having full online access to them through the cloned phone, I set up automatic fund transfers to clean out all of Joel's accounts and move the balances to my hidden offshore account. Then I did the same with 3 other small emergency accounts and other banks. When I finished, Joel's total liquid assets amounted to roughly $18 and some change. The updated brokerage account information I received early Monday morning also brought me great pleasure. The Uber broker had given accurate advice, and in the 2 trading days since my buy order, the stock values and the entire portfolio had risen by nearly 50%. The broker even advised me to hold the position for another day, anticipating further price increases. I sent him a brief confirmation but gave a firm order to sell and liquidate the entire account no later than 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, when the market would close for the day. All funds were to be transferred to the offshore account. The second broker had already liquidated the account on Friday as per the instructions, and the funds had been transferred without any issues. The third broker was in a panic over Joel's account, which was now deeply in the red due to the short option that had backfired spectacularly, just as I had anticipated. A margin call, a broker's demand for additional funds to maintain the trader's position when asset values fall to a certain level, was urgently needed to support the short position, or he would be forced to close and freeze the trading account by noon Eastern Time on Monday. Either way, Joel now owed a substantial amount of money to someone else. I decided to leave this last account open and active. After all, Joel's partners would want to know where their money went, and an open account showing massive stock losses would be a perfect exhibit. The money in the account before the losses would align well with the presumed embezzlement losses the partners could easily calculate based on the documents I mailed them. Of course, they would suspect that other money was hidden somewhere, but this seemed to be the main cash bank. Finally, I hit send to dispatch my surprise packages to the 3 other unsuspecting cuckolded husbands. Naturally, there would be outrage. I didn't expect them to hunt Joel down like a dog, but the more people angry at him, the better, I thought. Nothing fosters plausible deniability like adding a handful of enraged suspects to an already overflowing pot. On Monday, I spent the entire day with my mobile phone turned off, forcing myself to focus solely on my clients' needs in Carson City. By noon, I had finished installing the updated software patches, but I spent the rest of the day testing and even offered to stay another night to check everything one last time in the morning before flying home. Late Monday evening, Terry left a very troubling message on my voicemail. She sounded scared and was nearly in tears, but she didn't say why. I called her back and left several more messages, but she never responded. She never called again. There was absolutely nothing new or important on Joel's cloned BlackBerry. It seemed the partners had finished their conversation. All of Joel's financial and brokerage accounts were liquidated or administratively frozen. The gamblers had also started looking for Joel after he bet on the races and lost more than $27,000 over the weekend. Everyone was now involved, and the dance had only just begun. My job was done. With a sense of satisfaction from a job well done, I fell asleep soundly, like a virtuous man. On the way to the airport on Tuesday, I smashed the cloned BlackBerry against the hard road surface several dozen times, and the shards were eventually thrown into a local river. I burned my fake ID in Joel's name and slowly scattered the ashes along the road to the airport. Joel's USC jacket and cap were placed in a donation bin, and I forgot the aviator sunglasses on a busy airport diner counter just before my flight. I'm sure someone else was glad to find them. It was time to head back home and see what tune the band was playing. On Tuesday evening, I stopped by work for the first time since my business trip to report in, only to find a lock on the front door. Joel had left, and now the silent partners were running things. They had seized all the documents and were conducting a thorough audit with the help of a private investigative firm whose employees were so muscular it seemed they had no necks. These were clearly professional kneecappers.